Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game So today I got a fun and interesting episode for you guys this evening because we're going to be talking about what's going on with Analogue in 2025. Because when I ran that Analogue 3D delayed video, a lot of people had a lot of thoughts and comments that they left, and a lot of them were pretty disappointed in what's been happening with Analogue in recent memory. So I'm going to go over all of their announcements, what has been delayed, and what features are missing from certain products they've been promising for over 2 years now. Before you go down into the comments and say I'm a Mr. Pierce because I make videos on MiSTer, don't forget I had an entire Pocket series as well. I just stopped making them because not many things were happening on Pocket. I own multiple Analogue devices as well as obviously multiple MiSTer devices, so I'm really happy to play and talk about any hardware if it does a good job, and obviously Pocket did exactly that. But unfortunately, like we talked about before, Analogue 3D has been delayed till at least the end of July, but there's a couple other questions I have for this, going through some of the FAQs and other support documents for it about the video modes as well as support for analog televisions that you guys have been asking about in the comments, and I don't actually have an answer to. Now, when Analogue does deliver a device, it works well, it does what it says on the box, and people for the most part absolutely do enjoy them, but it's one of those things. When I said nobody should have been surprised that Analogue 3D was delayed, I meant it. I don't think a single Analogue product has ever been delivered on time, and even though I was in one of the original batches for Analogue Pocket, mine showed up like 6 or 7 months later than other people I knew that ordered on the exact same day as me. So it's one of those things, when you commit your money to Analogue, know you're going to take a very long time to actually get a product, and do remember that if you want a refund, they will issue you one very quickly, so it's not a situation where your money is completely tied up. You just need to ask nicely. But recently they updated people on Analogue Pocket firmware as well when they announced the delay as far as Analogue 3D is concerned. And the first thing that a ton of different people go in every single time when there is a new update is to see the new features and to see if one feature that people have been waiting for over 2 years now is actually there or not. And unfortunately, again, not only is it not included, it isn't even really mentioned, and that is DAC support, which we'll go over in just a minute. But you did get a 2.5 firmware for Analogue Pocket, fixed a couple bugs for some games, but people have been waiting for years now for DAC support for their Analogue Pocket dock so they can play their Analogue Pocket on a CRT television, whether that's a PVM or just a consumer set. This is something that Analogue's been talking about for the longest time now, and now they're not even saying support is coming on most pages for the Analogue Pocket. So I guess the question is it basically been abandoned or not? You did get some upgrades to some bugs affecting cue cards in games that weren't working correctly, and you got a bunch of new controllers working on dock, so that is a nice little creature comfort to have additional control options as far as the dock is concerned. But again, DAC is what everyone comments on every single video, and it seems like Analogue just basically said, screw this device, we're not supporting it anymore, because you cannot purchase the thing whatsoever. But we obviously have third-party devices like the Analogizer here. I know it's got a funny name, but it does the trick. It allows you to plug it into the card slot on the back of your Analogue Pocket, giving you full RGB, component, composite, S-video out, as well as a snack adapter all through those cartridge ports. And I reviewed this maybe like 12 or 18 months ago. It's been that long now, and I said it absolutely did what it advertises on the label and proved that the Analogue Pocket can get analog out without having to go through the dock. And it's one of those things. I've tried 3 different DACs that aren't made by Analogue on the Pocket dock, and not a single one of them will carry signal. So odds are some things being basically prevented within the dock from outputting that signal, so that Analogue could sell the DAC as an exclusive product to get you to an analog television to have RGB and component out. But unfortunately, still to this day, over 2 years since I first talked about the fact that DAC support was supposedly coming soon in an update, it still does not do anything with the Analogue Pocket whatsoever. That is going to lead into some questions for Analogue 3D as well that definitely don't seem to be going in a super positive direction. But Analogue states, we make products to celebrate and explore the history of video games with the respect it deserves. Well, I think maybe the consumer deserves a bit more respect when it comes to feature sets and products that they purchase when they were told that it was going to support a certain piece of hardware in the future, and at least with the recording of this video, purchasers still don't know if that's ever going to happen. And that seems to be one of Analogue's primary quote-unquote problems. Their PR and messaging is just basically non-existent. Now, I'm not saying that they have to blow people up on Twitter every single day, riding that hype train into the station about as hard as they can, but the fact is you don't really hear anything from Analogue whatsoever until they announce some new product or some sort of delay, and that kind of breeds a little bit of contempt and disappointment within the community of purchasers who pick up Analogue products. They have a reputation for not delivering on time, and they have a reputation for not including all of the features that they promised. Now, no one should ever buy a product expecting it to do more than what it says on the box, but Analogue advertised the DAC for Analogue Pocket and other devices, and those just have not materialized whatsoever. And I'm not saying Analogue doesn't make a great product, they make an outstanding product. They definitely have a great design aesthetic and an overall industrial design language that really does look both modern and retro at the same time. And when you put a game in Analogue, it does just work, and that's what we're expecting of them. But the issue is sometimes you can have a great product and a bad sales department, and it's one of those things you're never quite sure 100% what you're getting. Case in point, if we take a look at the Analogue 3D, you're going to see that there is that HDMI port on the back, and they spend a metric ton of time talking about getting that CRT and PVM look out of the 4K HDMI port for your television. The fact that Nintendo 64 was designed around a CRT, and that they want to have that interplay between the hardware and a CRT to achieve harmony as far as the look is concerned. It's very flowery language to say Nintendo 64 just looks better on a CRT television than it does on any sort of modern display, even with a RetroTink or anything else. It has a very small texture cache, and honestly, it just looks that much better on a CRT or a PVM, and we don't know if that's actually going to work with Analogue, because we know we're getting filters, but even those are going to be strange, and I'll explain in just a moment. But again, I understand that not everyone has a CRT out there. I'd probably say maybe 1 out of every 10 commenters do have one. Tell me down below if you have one or not. But people do love using CRT televisions because as much time as we spend trying to emulate the original look of CRT TVs, the reality is if you just plug a console or an FPGA device into a CRT TV, you're off to the races. You don't really have to worry about the filters. I'm so glad we have all sorts of modern scalers like the RetroTink 4K and the Pixel Effects More 4K, giving you the ability to kind of play around with the filters even though Pixel Effects doesn't have their analog outputs yet. But it's one of those things, I'm just waiting to see what Analogue's doing here with the 3D, because all they say is that you have 4K HDMI output in NTSC and PAL territories, but you don't have any indication as to whether or not DAC will work with something like the Analogue 3D, or if you can use a third-party DAC to get Analogue 3D to a television, considering I've tested basically like 3 different aftermarket DACs for the HDMI port on dock and I never get a signal. I do think Analogue is basically securing it in some way, because if you take a look at all of the notes here, note 11 is interesting. You can't use a capture card with the original display modes enabled, and that basically 99% makes it HDCP. It's being protected because if your television receives that signal and it displays it with those filters over top, it means it's a broadcast safe standard, and that means any capture card that uses broadcast signals, which is all of them, would be able to capture the image as well. So that means they're basically obscuring it behind something. And when they talk about the DAC and the FAQ, you'll see here the Analogue 3D is not mentioned whatsoever. So it really begs the question, is this going to be a digital only device? Now we should expect it to be, because Analogue has not said it'll work on any sort of CRT or PVM, but it is one of those things, the communication and the messaging is still a little bit sloppy here. And when DAC was a product that they sold to a bunch of people with the promise that it was going to work with a bunch of their systems in the future, and now in 2025 it still doesn't work with basically anything and is barely ever mentioned, it is just a bummer. And again, we know you can get Analogue support out of the pocket, so it's one of those things. If Analogue doesn't want to make it work with DAC, then they should at least allow something like Analogue 3D to work with other third-party DACs. But considering the fact that it doesn't even allow you to capture the original screen modes, I'm assuming that is going to be a no. And you'll see here that they're still stating that the Analogue Dock and Pocket are coming to DAC at some point in time, but I've been talking about this intermittently for over 2 years now, and every single time I run an Analogue video on any updates or new products, the comment section is basically, DAC when can I use my DAC? Is Analogue abandoning DAC? I'm really upset. I spent a lot of money on this thing and I can't use it, because people did buy them just for the Analogue Pocket, and they've had a device that is basically nothing but a paperweight sitting on their desk for basically like 2 years now, and that is just a bummer. And again, I'm not making this video to kind of crap on Analogue. I do really like their products. It is disappointing that they delayed the controller on Amazon as well, because I highly imagine 8-bit dough is finished with this thing. But honestly, all they really have to say is, hey, here's what we're working on, here are kind of the issues that we're facing. For Analogue 3D, if they just came out and said, the industrial case design, the injection molding isn't quite working perfectly, we want it to be a perfect product and we're dealing with the factory to get it right, people would be fine. Or if they said, we just need a couple more months to button up the FPGA code so you get a perfect experience day one with no patches, people would be fine with that as well. But when a company doesn't provide information, consumers go and run with whatever narratives in their head. and I can tell you they are not very friendly to Analogue whatsoever. But Analogue 3D is delayed. It seems like DAC's been completely abandoned, and who knows what'll work on Analogue 3D as far as DACs or analog support. We just don't know, and that is a bummer. But we're done. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.